Good morning. My name is Mr. Thompson. Can you tell me your full name, please?
Good morning. My full name is Sarah Al-Masri.
Thank you, Sarah. Can I see your identification?
Sure, here you go.
Thank you. That's fine. Now, in this first part, I'd like to ask you some questions. Let's talk about what you do. Are you a student or do you work?
I'm currently a student. I'm studying chemical engineering at university.
Why did you choose that subject?
I've always been interested in how materials and reactions work, and I wanted to study something practical that also challenges me intellectually. Engineering seemed like a good fit.
What do you enjoy most about your course?
I enjoy the problem-solving aspect. It's really satisfying to apply theory to real-world situations. I also like the lab work. It's hands-on and helps me understand the material better.
Are there any subjects you find difficult?
Yeah, I find thermodynamics quite challenging. The concepts are abstract and the calculations can be complex, but I try to revise regularly and ask questions when I don't understand.
Let's move on to talk about your home. Do you live in a house or an apartment?
I live in an apartment with my family. It's on the third floor of a building.
What do you like about your home?
I like that it's cozy and peaceful. There's a lot of natural light, and we have a small balcony where I like to read or have tea in the evenings.
Is there anything you would like to change about it?
Yes, I'd like to have a bigger kitchen. It gets a bit crowded when more than one person is trying to. More storage space would also be helpful.
What kind of home would you like to live in the future?
In the future, I'd love to live in a small house with a garden. Somewhere with space for a pet and maybe a study room to work in quietly.
Now, let's talk about free time. What do you usually do in your free time?
I read books, watch documentaries, or go for a walk. Recently, I've started learning graphic design as a hobby as well.
How much time do you spend on your hobbies?
It depends on my schedule, but I try to spend at least an hour a day doing something I enjoy, especially on weekends.
Have your hobbies changed?
Yes, definitely. When I was younger, I liked drawing and playing with friends outside. Now, my interests are more digital and skill-based, like design and photography.
Do you prefer to spend your free time alone or with others?
I enjoy both. If I've had a stressful day, I prefer to be but I also love spending time with friends or family on weekends. It really depends on my mood.
Let's talk about technology. What kind of technology do you use every day?
I use my smartphone, laptop, and sometimes a tablet. I rely on them for communication, studying, and even entertainment.
Do you think technology makes life easier?
Yes, in many ways. It saves time, allows instant communication, and gives access to information anytime. But I also think it's important to take breaks from screens.
Are there any gadgets you'd like to buy?
Yes, I'd like to get a smartwatch. I track my health and manage notifications without always checking my phone.
Do you think young people today depend too much on technology?
I think so. Many young people can't go a few hours without checking their phones. It's helpful, but it's easy to become addicted or distracted by it.
Thank you, that's the end of part. Now turn to part 2. I'm going to give you a topic, and I'd like you to talk about it for 1 to 2 minutes. You'll have 1 minute to think about what you're going to say. You can make some notes if you wish. Here is your topic. Describe a law in your country that you think is important. You should say what the law is, how you first law, who the law affects, and explain why you think this law is important. You have 1 minute to prepare. All right, you may start speaking now.
One law in my country that I believe is extremely important is the ban on using mobile phones while driving. This law states that drivers are not allowed to use handheld mobile devices while operating a vehicle, texting, or browsing. The only exception is if the phone is being used in hands-free mode, such as through Bluetooth or mounted on the dashboard, and even then, the driver must remain fully in control of the vehicle at all times. I first learned about this law when I started preparing for my driving test a few years ago. It was a driving handbook, and my instructor emphasized it during lessons. He told me about the serious consequences of distracted driving and explained that this law had been introduced in response to a growing number of accidents caused by mobile phone use behind the wheel. This law affects every licensed driver in the country, regardless of age or age. It also indirectly impacts pedestrians, cyclists, and passengers, because it aims to improve road safety for everyone. It applies not just on highways but also in city streets, and even when a vehicle is stationary at traffic lights, you're still not allowed to pick up your phone unless the engine is turned off. I think it's important for several reasons. First of all, it's a matter of public safety. Studies have shown that using a phone while driving is just as dangerous as driving under the influence of alcohol. Your attention is divided, your reaction times are slower, and your ability to make split-second decisions is reduced. With this law in place, risks and are hopefully discouraged from engaging in such behavior. Secondly, the law sends a clear social message that reckless driving behavior is unacceptable. When people are caught violating this rule, they face heavy fines, penalty points on their license, and in some cases, even suspension. This acts as a strong create a culture of accountability on the roads. Finally, this law is important because of the technological reality we live in today. Almost everyone owns a smartphone, and the temptation to check messages or answer calls while driving is very high. Without a strict law, people might not fully grasp the seriousness of the both for themselves and for others. In conclusion, I believe that banning mobile phone use while driving is not just a useful law but a necessary one. It protects lives, promotes responsible behavior, and keeps our roads safer. I fully support this law, and I think there should be even more awareness campaigns around it lightly.
Do you think this law has changed people's behavior?
Yes, definitely. Most people I know now use hands-free devices or avoid using their phones while driving altogether, so it has had a positive effect.
Thank you. I'll now ask you a few questions related to this topic.
Let's talk about helping others in society. In your opinion, are people today more or less willing to help others compared to the past?
That's a great question. I think people are still willing to help, but the way they do it has changed. In the past, help was more direct, like neighbors supporting each other or communities. Now, a lot of help happens online, through donations, awareness campaigns, or sharing information. It's still meaningful, but maybe it feels less personal than before.
Do you think it's important to teach children to help others?
Absolutely. Teaching children to be kind and helpful from a young age lays a more compassionate society. If they learn to support classmates, respect others' struggles, and give without expecting something in return, they'll carry those values into adulthood. It's not something that comes naturally to everyone, so schools and families play a key role in that development.
How can governments encourage citizens?
Governments can promote volunteering and community service by providing incentives or even integrating it into education. They can also highlight stories of people making a difference, which can inspire others. It's also important that citizens feel their efforts are making a difference, so transparency in social initiatives.
Do you think people help others more in small communities or in big cities?
That's interesting. I think in small communities, there's a stronger sense of connection, so people naturally look out for each other. In big cities, people might be more isolated or focused on their own lives, so helping may happen less often or feel less. But big cities also have more organized programs and resources, so in a way, help can be more structured and wide-reaching.
Alright, that's the end of the speaking test. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's talk about helping others in society. In your opinion, are people today more or less willing to help past?
That's a great question. I think people are still willing to help, but the way they do it has changed. In the past, help was more direct, like neighbors supporting each other or communities coming together. Now, a lot of help happens online, through donations, awareness campaigns, or sharing information. It's still meaningful, but maybe it feels less personal than before.
Do you think it's important to teach children to help others?
Absolutely. Teaching children to be kind and helpful from a young age lays the foundation for a more compassionate society. If they learn to support classmates, respect others' struggles, and give without in return, they'll carry those values into adulthood. It's not something that comes naturally to everyone, so schools and families play a key role in that development.
How can governments encourage citizens to help one another?
Governments can promote volunteering and community service by providing incentives or even integrating it into. They can also highlight stories of people making a difference, which can inspire others. It's also important that citizens feel their efforts are making a difference, so transparency in social initiatives is key.
Do you think people help others more in small communities or in big cities?
That's interesting. In communities, there's a stronger sense of connection, so people naturally look out for each other. In big cities, people might be more isolated or focused on their own lives, so helping may happen less often or feel less personal. But big cities also have more organized programs and resources, so in a way, help can be more structured.
Alright, that's the end of the speaking test. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's move on to part 3. I'll ask you a few more questions related to this topic. Do you think all laws are necessary, or are some outdated?
That's a good question. I think the majority of laws are created to serve a useful purpose. They provide structure and stability in society. However, not all laws for time. As societies evolve, so do our values and norms. Some laws become outdated and irrelevant. For example, in some countries, there are still laws that criminalize certain types of clothing or prohibit harmless behaviors that were once considered taboo. These laws may no longer reflect the views of modern society and can even redeem unnecessarily. So I believe governments should periodically review and revise the legal system to ensure laws stay relevant and fair.
How do laws reflect a country's values?
Laws are often a direct expression of what a country believes in, its principles and moral foundations. For instance, countries value on equality will usually have strong anti-discrimination laws. Those that prioritize environmental protection often legislate strictly against pollution or deforestation. In contrast, more authoritarian systems may have laws that limit speech or press freedom, reflecting different priorities. So if you study the nation, you can often get a clear picture of its political orientation and cultural values. Laws don't just regulate behavior, they communicate what a society considers right and wrong.
Do you think people always obey the law? Why or why not?
Unfortunately, no. People don't always obey the law. There are exceptions. Sometimes, it's a matter of ignorance. People may not be fully aware that a certain action is illegal. In other cases, the law may be seen as unfair or unnecessary, so individuals deliberately ignore it. Speeding is a good example. Many drivers exceed speed limits because they think it's harmless or because enforcement is. Additionally, if people see others breaking the law without consequences, they may feel encouraged to do the same. That's why both education and enforcement are crucial. People need to understand the law and trust that it is applied fairly, or they won't take it seriously.
How can governments encourage citizens to follow laws?
I think the most effective way is through a combination of education, fairness, and consistent enforcement. First, citizens need to understand why a law exists. If people believe that a law benefits society, like seatbelt regulations or environmental rules, they're more likely to comply. Second, laws must be applied equally. See that the rich and powerful are treated differently, they lose respect for the system. Finally, there should be clear and reasonable consequences for breaking the law, and those consequences must be enforced reliably. When people know there's a real risk of punishment, they tend to think twice.
Do you think harsh punishments reduce crime?
Complicated issue. Some people believe that harsh punishments act as a deterrent, and in some situations, that might be true. For example, very heavy fines for drunk driving or corporate fraud may discourage people from taking those risks. But I also think the certainty of punishment is more effective than severity. they'll definitely get caught and held accountable. Even a moderate penalty can be enough to change their behavior. On the other hand, if enforcement is weak, even the harshest punishment loses its power. Also, excessive penalties can sometimes backfire. They may lead to resentment, or even reduce trust in the justice system.
What of laws do you think we will need more of in the future?
I think we'll need to focus more on digital and environmental legislation. As our lives become more intertwined with technology, there will be growing issues around data privacy, artificial intelligence, and cybercrime. For example, laws will need to clarify who's responsible or how personal data should be protected. At the same time, with climate change accelerating, we'll need stricter regulations around carbon emissions, sustainable development, and environmental conservation. Future laws should balance technological innovation with ethical responsibility, and prioritize sustainability on a global level.
Is it better to have many laws or fewer, simpler ones?
That's an interesting question. In theory, simpler laws are easier for people to understand and follow, which is a good thing. However, life today is complex, and sometimes very specific laws are necessary to deal with particular situations. The internet has created legal challenges that didn't exist a few decades ago, so we need tailored legislation. I think the ideal approach is not to have too many laws, but to ensure the ones we do have are clear, accessible, and well enforced. Legal systems should focus on quality over quantity.
Thank you. That is the end of the speaking test.
That's the end of our IELTS speaking mock test. If you found this useful, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and check out the full playlist for more practice tests and English speaking tips. Thanks for watching, and good luck with your exam.